We have actually privatized public functions. The ultimate public function is the war power, and we have now privatized that.
We economic hitmen have created the world's first truly global empire.
This is about corporations. And this is old-fashioned or refashioned corporate welfarism.
Why do we live in a world where everyone speaks about freedom and the benefits of that freedom accrue to fewer and fewer people as capital and power concentrates?
The people who are losing because their investments are wiped out and because their savings are wiped out are losing because they were part of a society that went down the wrong track.
Most societies have an elite tries to stay in power. And the ways they stay in power is not merely by controlling the means of production, to be Marxist, i.e. controlling the money, but by controlling the cognitive map, the way we think.
We teach our economics in a way that assumes this very neat, simplistic, almost psychopathic individual.
They're getting away with all kinds of legal thievery. People are beginning to get angry, but not nearly enough.
It's like a den of thieves. You know, it's one of the most, it's like Sodom and Gomorrah down there.
You should not assume because you don't have a background in economics or in law that these issues are somehow too complex for you. They're not complex at all. It's very simple. It's about power, and it's about democracy. And you understand that just as well as I do.
I don't think there's anything deeper than what's on the surface. I mean, intellectuals have to make it look complicated. That's part of their job.
We economic hitmen have managed to create the world's first truly global empire, and it's basically a secret empire. We do it in many ways, but principally we identify a country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sisters. The money never actually goes to the country. It goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country that help a few very wealthy people, but don't benefit the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity or have cars to drive on the highways, and yet they're left holding a huge debt that they can't repay. So we go back at some point and say, you know, you can't pay your debts. Give us a pound of flesh. Sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies. Vote with us on the next critical UN vote. Allow us to build a military base in your backyard. Something along these lines. And when we fail, the jackals go in and either overthrow or assassinate these leaders. And if the jackals fail, as they did in Iraq, then we send in the military. I don't think the failure is capitalism. I think it's a specific kind of capitalism that we've developed. We've created what I consider a mutant, viral form of capitalism. And this mutant form of capitalism, which I think is really a predatory form of capitalism, has created an extremely unstable, unsustainable, unjust, and very, very dangerous world. I've met a lot of terrorists. I've interviewed them for books. I've never met one who wanted to be a terrorist. They're desperate people. If we want to get rid of terrorism, we must get rid of the root causes, that cancer that is destroying our whole system. Because I think it's really important that we understand today we cannot have homeland security unless we understand that the whole planet is our homeland. It's very fair to say that the modern empire is created secretly with a sort of invisible hand, invisible operations. In the past, all the old empires, the British Empire, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Romans, everybody knew that those empires were being created. The countries sent their young men off to conquer other lands, and everybody bragged about it. There was always a justification, spreading civilization, spreading Christianity, something along those lines. But the fact of the matter is, everybody knew what was going on. Well, today, this empire that's been created, most people living in the United States, for example, have no idea that we've been doing this, that they are benefiting from the fruits of terrible exploitation of human and natural resources around the planet. People don't know this. And frankly, I think this is a huge threat to democracy, because a democracy is built on the proposition that you have an informed electorate. And if your electorate doesn't understand this most basic policy of foreign affairs, then it's not informed. And if we're not informed, then how do we vote democratically?
There have been a lot of rumors of conspiracy in this country. Everything from the JFK assassination to the NBA basketball games being fixed to the event that has changed this country forever, 9/11. I think any person would like to believe that there are no conspiracies, that everything that goes on in this country is on the up and up, that there is no collusion. Or there's nothing like conspiracy happening in our government, the media, or even the sports that we all enjoy. The definition of a conspiracy is an agreement to perform together an illegal, wrongful, or subversive act. If you listen to the mainstream media, they dismiss almost everything against the status quo as a conspiracy theory, or the people that go against the status quo as a conspiracy nut. If you listen to the media or the government, it's almost like the word conspiracy needs to be taken out of the dictionary, because it's not possible for people in the media and government to conspire in any way. Like their DNA does not allow them to conspire to do anything that's not on the level. I guess to find out where you stand on the conspiracy issue is this. You have to ask yourself this question. Do you believe there are people out there that will do whatever it takes to gain power or manipulate situations for personal gain? Because if you don't, then for you, it's impossible to believe that people can lie about anything, and that any conspiracy is simply an impossibility. I'm going to mention several stories that everyone who sees this video needs to Google for themselves and see that some things that would be considered a conspiracy years ago have not only become fact, but public record as well. Here's some of the conspiracies that have proven true. In 1763, the smallpox-infected blankets were given to the Native Americans. In 1919, the Chicago Black Sox scandal. In 1932, the General Motors streetcar conspiracy. And in 1933, the attempt to overthrow President Roosevelt. Also in 1933, the Reichstag fire in Germany, and in 1939 to 1946, the Manhattan Project, which eventually employed more than 130,000 people and cost nearly $2 billion. In the late 1950s, the quiz show scandal. In 1962, Operation Northwoods. In 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident that started the Vietnam War. In 1972, Nixon and Watergate. In 1980, Nelson Bunker Hunt and Silver Thursday. In 1981 to 86, Iran-Contra. In 2001, Enron and Arthur Anderson. And the granddaddy of them all, in 1963, the JFK assassination. To my amazement, there is still some debate on this subject. While it has not been proven fact, I think that most people that have the ability to think for themselves think there's at least a possibility that Oswald was not the lone gunman. Yet to this day it has been swept under the rug as if it were not important enough to look into again officially after all these years. I want to take a second to pose this question. Would you ever believe that for 40 years, between 1932 and 1972, that the United States Public Health Service will conduct an experiment on around 600 black men in the late stages of syphilis? These were poor black sharecroppers from one of the poorest counties of Alabama. They were never informed of their situation and the seriousness of the disease they acquired, yet they were told they were being treated for, and I quote, bad blood. Meanwhile, their doctors had no intention of curing them at all. They were just gathering data from the autopsies after they died. So these doctors knew these men were sick and could have helped them, but they did nothing to help these sick men for over 40 years. They only sat and watched as their health declined. In the end, 28 men died from a direct result of having syphilis with no treatment. 100 men died from complications, while 40 wives were also infected, and to top it off, 19 innocent children were born with congenital syphilis. This all happened under the United States government's watch and under doctor supervision, and more importantly, under the humanitarian umbrella of helping these poor black men with free health care. So forgive me when the last thing I want these days is the government involved in the medicine and health care for this country. I think that many people can't handle this story. Some people just can't accept that something like this could ever happen. That respected doctors could allow people just to rot away and do nothing to help their fellow man. And how could all of them keep this a secret for 40 years? I mean, that's impossible, right? I mean, conspiracies don't exist. They're just fabrications that crazy people talk about. So now that you hear this from me in this video, do you believe it? Do you think it's a conspiracy? So if you don't believe me, who would you believe? Is there a name or person that you go to see if this is true? Is there a branch of government or the media that you trust enough to believe them if they told you that this actually happened? Why don't you take a good hard look at this article from the New York Times and read what it says, and then tell me there are no conspiracies. Think about if your father was one of those men that was used as a guinea pig for the U.S. Public Health Services. So before you go assuming that, that couldn't happen, or that's just a conspiracy, why don't you do your own research and find out for yourself that people in power have done some horrible things. And just because you would never do something that sick and twisted doesn't mean the next guy won't. Now, decades later, they want to apologize to them. And I think they're owed a hell of a lot more than an apology. If it were me and my family, I think I'd tell them where to stick their apology. People need to understand one thing. For as long as people have existed on this earth, there have been people that have ruled other people. America is not the rule, it's the exception, that is quickly becoming what every other government has always been. You need to take a good look around you and wake up to what's really going on in this country.
Cecil Rhodes left some handwritten manuscripts upon his death. They weren't published until quite a bit later. But in one of those, this is what he wrote. Now, this is from the words of the man himself. I consider that we English are the finest race in the world, and that the more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for the human race. What scheme could we think of to forward this object? I look into history and I read the story of the Jesuits. I see that what they were able to do in a bad cause, and I might say under bad leaders. In the present day, I became a member of the Masonic order. I see the wealth and power they possess, the influence they hold. And I think over their ceremonies, and I wonder that a large body of men can devote themselves to what at times appear the most ridiculous and absurd rites without an object and without an end. The idea, gleaming and dancing before one's eyes like a will-o'-the-wisp, at last frames itself into a plan. Why should we not form a secret society with but one object, the furtherance of the British Empire and bringing of the whole uncivilized world under British rule? That was his vision, in his own words. Now back to Quigley's words. He said that the goal of this secret society was, and I quote, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political systems of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. The system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. End quote.